Welcome to D.coded, the podcast that decodes the design, technology, and experiences shaping our world and planet. I am Melisa Leñero.
And I'm Saeema Ahmed-Kristensen. Together we explore the systems, behaviors, and technologies influencing how we live, work, and connect, from human interactions to the ecosystems we are part of.
Each episode is a conversation with technologists, designers, entrepreneurs, and everyday users. Join us. Hi, this is Melisa Leñero.
And I'm Saeema Ahmed-Kristensen.
And we're very happy that you are joining us today in our first episode of Why Design Matters and D.coded. So I am a designer by training and currently rediscovering what design is in times where the world is challenged in many different ways. From the artificial intelligence revolution to deep societal changes and massive ecosystem destruction, and also seeing it through the lens of design. What is the role of design in all of this? Over to you, Saeema.
Yeah, and I'm a professor of design engineering and innovation, and also director of Digit Lab, a research center based in the University of Exeter, where we are exploring some of the questions you've just raised around digital technologies, their adoption, and what that means for innovation, but also their impact on society. So I'm looking forward to discovering why design matters, not just from us, but from the perspective of our guest over the next few episodes. So shall we ask you first, Melisa, what's your thoughts on why design matters? Why do you want to do this podcast?
That's a great question. And as I said, I'm currently rediscovering what design is in times of where things are shifting this fast. And I think for me, I'm realizing that we are asking too much of a word. Like we are overexploiting a word. And design has become a complex word that has been overutilized by designers and non-designers, right? Like many people now use the word design. I'm designing this or I'm designing that, which is great, but also that conflates ideas and principles. So to me, the word design is complicated and risky because it encompasses, or we're trying that it encompasses to encompass too much in just like one tiny word. And unfortunately, the word has become overexploited. And I think for me, if I would need to explain, but what it encompasses, for me, it encompasses mindsets, right? The mindset that you need to have that we can explore in a bit. Like what are the methodologies, the tools that we use, the processes, the different outputs, the system in which we are operating. So at the same time, the outputs, as I said, they vary depending on the problem at hand, or even if you have something that you are innovating. So it can be physical, it can be digital products, it can be services, it can be processes, it can be something that is graphic. So it varies from different, depending what you want to solve. So design is multi-layered. It's a multi-layered field that encapsulates like training a specific mindset to be comfortable with ambiguity, right? Like we are very comfortable with not knowing what the solution is going to be. So that's kind of like the design thinking part. And then there's a methodology. So we follow a methodology that is the design process, like the double diamond framework that Design Council has created, or different other processes that we can delve later on. And then design operates within a system or systems. So it's kind of like the systems thinking, right? Like to understand what are the wicked problems in which we are operating. And the wicked problem means something that is, it doesn't encompass only one field. It touches on different fields. So it's quite difficult to solve with one solution. And it coexists with other fields like engineering, science, art, technology, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not in isolation. It doesn't operate in isolation. So that results in a very tangible output, like a product or a service.
Yeah.
So,
and who do you think that's beneficial to, all these outputs and products?
Well, depending on what the solution is, and I think it will be benefit different people, like the main users that we are designing for. And I think this is where we have to be very critical of who are we designing it for? Are we designing it for the user, the final user? Are we designing it for the company to make more profit? Are we designing it for the healthcare system? Are we designing it for the planet? Are we designing it for government? So there's no straightforward solution. So, but before I take more time, I want to hear from you, Saeema. What is it for you? Why design matters to you?
Yeah, I think we are at a crux point because there is a lot of changes happening in the world. There's
Mhm,
like you mentioned, the digital technologies, AI and beyond, but there's also more responsibility coming to designers. We are being asked to save the world, as such, and thinking about societal problems, but that makes it more complex. It is a wicked problem, but it makes it exciting. And I think design brings a way of thinking that is beyond just giving form to an object or selecting the colors or the materials. And of course, that is a very trained discipline, and we should not underplay and
mhm,
forget what is needed to have make those sort of decisions. But I think we're at a point where design is important beyond design problems. So it's not just about design or engineering sectors or the creative sectors. And I think
mhm,
quite often it's thought that creative people only solve problems for creative sectors. Actually, creative people and designers can bring that way of thinking and contribute far, far beyond the design of services or products. So sometimes the role of design or the discipline of design can be really obvious because we can see the outputs. Other times it's not obvious, and it's you could be using that to design the way you interact with the tax system, or all the way through to looking at complex problems such as healthcare services, or looking at how you improve the lives of people with dementia, or
mhm,
thinking about encouraging sustainability or the impact of technology or embedding technology. So, a lot of science happening, which is driving forward the technology. But the innovation is not just the science. The innovation is bringing that all together to solve problems or create value in different ways. So I think, we've talked a little bit about design. You mentioned design and the tangible outputs, and I think all those are really valid. I think in addition to that, I would also say that the ideas can lead to real innovation and creating startups where it's not just those double diamond which helps expand the way of thinking to generate concepts and ideas, but taking that all the way through to understand the needs of the users and how a product or a service may be used or how it could be potentially misused. And because we've got all these technologies that are being developed, that is quite important because we can't foresee the harm of AI or the benefits of harm very, very accurately. But we've also got other topics coming in. And having people with a background of design thinking looking at those problems is quite exciting to me. Whether it's called design or not, I'm not sure it's really important. But you mentioned mindsets, Melissa. So I was just wondering if we could return back to that. And what sort of skills do you think a designer needs? What is distinctive about a design person?
Yeah, I think you mentioned that design. I really like what you mentioned about, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you mentioned that design is a facilitator, right? Like it's enabling a conversation between different fields, different people, um, that not necessarily are within design. And I think for me, the mindset and the skills are changing. I would say that the designer that I was when I started with the designer that I am at the moment, like the skills have changed massively with the
Mm.
introduction as well with AI specifically. So I could start with um, overall, I think a designer has the ability to turn vision into a tangible reality, something that people have thought, something that people need. Eventually, going through different processes, then we can turn those things into a tangible reality. It doesn't matter if it's a product, a service, in the digital world, in the real world, it doesn't matter. And I think that's powerful because we use, and before, that's what I meant with the skills that we had before, because before I was able to, well, I use my hands to create
Yeah.
furniture and to do
Hmm.
furniture, right? Like right now, probably you don't do the prototypes straight away with wood. Probably you would. Probably you can use also AI, like digital twins, for example, right? Like there are many ways in which you can use the skills, but for me, that's powerful. Like we are problem seekers. We understand the problem, and that's what it moves us. Like, what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve? And I think we are between what the people are saying that that's a problem and what is actually happening. And we are
Mm.
in the middle, like understanding that middle bit that is missing. And
So is that about reframing the problem and trying to better understand what the actual problem is? And what would you use to understand that?
well, I think for me, and going back to kind of the the work that I'm doing currently, it's on social design. I think for me, it is really asking people and really taking the time to go and ask people, not exactly like, what do you need? Because that's not gonna, people, it's really difficult to say, what do you need? But by having a conversation, by actually listening to your surroundings, what the people are telling you, etc., you would be able to observe
Yeah.
and absorb what is it, what is missing, what is the missing bit that they're not telling you, but they are telling you through an in-depth interview. So yeah, I think 90% of the time is not what the design brief stated, as you know, right? Like we it's something else that has been uncovered or goes uncovered through the design process using the right tools, exercising design thinking skills, and evolving different viewpoints. And I'm using here design thinking as a actual process of thinking in design. That's what I mean by design thinking. And for me, it's a magical and uncertain process that not a lot of people is comfortable with. And I just want to, the last thing that I want to say, like, we should be, there's a caveat here
Hmm.
because also not all the time the process leads to positive outcomes. So design can also destroy, harm, and bring negative unintended consequences. So as you mentioned, right, like therefore that's why it is so important to truly understand it, define the boundaries that we are comfortable, and what are the trade-offs that we make as design when we are designing something else for someone else.
Yeah, that's
What is it
quite
for you?
yes, I think it's I think what you're describing are these wicked problems that are very challenging to resolve and quite important at this time when we're looking at a lot of changes that are happening
Mhm.
and a lot of possibilities and opportunities that are coming with them and a responsibility too. So for me, it is about the things that you've mentioned. So it's about ambiguity and being really comfortable with that ambiguity and uncertainty. So
Mhm.
thinking through that we often describe in research designers and design, well, not designers, design as an ill-defined problem
Mm.
versus a well-defined problem. And this is coming
So,
from
sorry, can you
psychology.
explain that? The
Yeah. Yeah, I could it's slightly different from the wicked problem idea where you're thinking about the knock-on effects on other things and how to solve something which without introducing an unintended consequence as you've just described. So the ill-defined problems are where you're thinking you've got a starting point when you start a problem and you've got a goal you've got to achieve and then you've got a way to get there. So when it's well defined, it's really obvious to see this is how we start, this is what we've got to do, or there may be more than one way, but there's one outcome that you're reaching. So that's often applied to fields like maths or engineering, where um, if you're got a chessboard, for example, that's a classic example always given. You've got this these board, so you've got positions of each piece. So that's your starting point. Now, if
Mhm.
you're in design, your starting point would be scrambling around to find the right information, finding the user need, trying to really understand what that problem is. And then you've got in that chess game, you know what you want to get to. You want to capture the goal of the king. You want to capture the king in there. And each piece allows you to go through different positions and move in different positions. So that's your strategy of getting from one piece to the other. It's often called operators, but that is just, in my mind, is just a process. That's the way of
Mhm.
thinking about it. So when you come to ill-defined problems, that can start. That's unclear in design. You have to gather the information. You've got to find it, and you've got to work out what information is relevant. And then it's unclear the goal because you've got more than one solution. So you think about a way to listen
Mhm.
to music. There are many different ways to listen to music if that was
Mhm.
your problem. And there's many ways to get there. So that creates an ambiguity and uncertainty, which is quite challenging for people to handle in there. But that's just one of the topics. And I think that the other things that design do, it's the ability to come up with lots of different ideas and solutions, just because that is the nature of ill-defined problems. And I often do a little test with a paperclip when I start a class, and I ask people for 3 minutes. It's great to do with a song and put music in the background and get them to come up with as many ideas and uses of the paperclip. It's a well-known challenge. And when you give this challenge to people who have come from an engineering domain or very well-defined domain and are not used to this type of thinking, they will come up with 3, 4, 5 ideas. But then you hand it over to design students and they'll come with 15, 20 ideas. So just those number of different solutions and ideas is part of the experience of designing. As part of our podcast, we're sort of talking about design matters right now, but what other sort of themes would you like to sort of pick up? I think you've touched on societal design, but what would it be that we'd like to see, and which guests and speakers would we like to talk about which topics?
Yeah, before I answer that, I love the example of I remember the class of the paperclip.
Yeah,
And
you
as you
remember
said,
that? Yeah,
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 and I think
yeah,
it's great to,
yeah.
as you said, like it's so simple, but at the same it's so complicated, and it's just like opens it opens you up to think about different ways in which you can use one example or like one thing that you haven't used it before like that. Um, I think for me the different topics would be I'm really interested in social design and what design can do for social good. And what are the skills that we have? What are the tools that we're bringing into the conversation to do um, work that is going to be impacting many, many people? I would love also to discuss what design is as a strategic economic value. And it sounds very dry, but what I mean by that is what is the economic value that design is bringing into the table, right? Because as you said, probably some people think of us as the guys that are putting the post-it notes on the walls, or like the crazy ones, the wacky ones, the ones with there's a joke, recurring joke that is, oh, you are the designer. Why don't you just like polish the slides? And as you said, we shouldn't be downplaying that because that's a skill. And because of that, people are able to understand the message that you are trying to convey. So, and that brings, we can put an economic value to those skills. So I think if we also touch on the economic value that design brings, that would be incredible. And also, design is a complex systems thinking. And I also want to be careful because I know that there's been talking about the overutilized words, design
Yeah.
thinking or systems thinking or design strategist, all these words that have been overutilized more and more. But let's unpack that. Like, what design is in a complex systems thinking, and what do we mean by a system, and what do we mean by thinking part of design and as a facilitator? And I see this conversation as design being a facilitator of very tough conversations, and the trade-offs that we have to make as designers to continue the path. And as you said, because we have found different ways of solving a problem, what are going to be what are the consequences if we choose A versus B? And
Yeah,
I think, Mhm. Go ahead.
no, no, that's very interesting. That, and that's really relevant to design people. And we're also trying to bring in people, an audience that are who aren't designers in there. So for them, probably there's as well as understanding this and expanding this thinking of our word of what is design. We want to bring those other fields, as we've mentioned, the technologies and the innovations in there. So I would hope that we would explore different topics such as AI, which is, of course, everybody is exploring, but there's so many perspectives in there. Um, the opportunities, but also the responsibilities. So not one perspective alone. We've also known about technologies such as 3D printers and additive manufacturing. That's been around for quite a while now. And when they first arrived, because it allows you to actually produce and manufacture and make your own product as such, the argument being used was design is now the barrier. So the question is, with AI, is that changing? You're saying you could do the finish and polishing the PowerPoints. We could see AI tools and add-ins in PowerPoint, which allows you. It's called the designer. Is that
Mm.
design doing that? So what is happening in that field, given that the other progressions with digital technology that's taking place? We've seen the first fashion show, that where it's all the designs were created by AI, take place in New York. And that is exciting to see. What are people's views on that? So where will design still remain and be useful? And where will human expertise and skills be critical? I think it would also be interesting to explore other new technologies that are on the horizon, but where the UK at least have identified them as important. Quantum, both the materials and the computing, and understanding how far away are these technologies, and what is the likely impact going to be on people, and what sort of innovations could we see? And thinking about new materials, we've talked a bit about social design and biomaterials. We saw in RCA, when we both met in the Global Innovation course and other courses, a whole explosion of students being really interested in making materials from biomaterials, thinking about the waste. We saw
Mhm.
products coming out with leaves, and people using orange peel, and mushrooms, and a whole variety of different things in there. So I think all those topics are going to be really interesting. What about the format? So today it's the two of us talking about design matters. What do you want to bring in, and who would you hope to bring in? What type of people?
Yeah, I would love to, as you said, we're bringing we want to talk about different topics that we are
Yeah.
not, as we are designers, we are facilitators, which means that we have our craft, we know our craft, but also we are very good at facilitating a conversation with other people. So I would love to see bring together different designers, right,
Yeah.
in different fields, different technologists, researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs, even policymakers, right? Like, what are the policymakers talking now on design? Is it the UK spending in design or the UK spending in technology? Or how the division is being made now that with the revolution of AI. So I would like to bring them together and together with them explore new themes that are emerging, as you said, like regenerative design or like with different examples that we have. Like, let's talk about synthetic personas. Let's talk about the different biomaterials, as you said. Like, I remember I did back in, I don't know, like 20 years ago, I was exploring with biomaterials, with corn husks,
Yep.
and it was ages ago, right? And I think a lot, like you've seen some of the momentum, but it hasn't had a lot of. Right now, we're seeing more an explosion of that. But
Yep.
like, how much in investment do we need in biomaterials, and how much investment we need in the different topics that we've been discussing, like designers and quantum technologies, for example. But let me ask you something, because I really like what you said before about the design, like combining design with all these different technologies. And I want to hear from you, why why do you think design should be paired with these big names of like quantum technologies, for example? Or yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just taking the view that the podcast should be broader than design as
Mhm.
defined as a discipline or the people as it is today. But it's technology, there's there's different perspectives in there. One is the innovation of the technology, and I cannot expect us to sit there. I do know some of my colleagues working metamaterials. They have deep science and thinking that we can't suddenly jump in and replace. But there needs to be an understanding of how these materials can be adopted, and what can they be adopted for. And that's
Mm.
just one example, but that's the same with other technologies. So quantum computing is being talked about, and then it's the threat of quantum computing being able to open every password. So what does that mean in redesigning computers and passwords, and how we are going to be today? So these are design problems, or bringing that sort of thinking allows us to both take advantage of those technologies and really innovate, but also think through how do we need to regulate, because we need to think about what are the possible scenarios that we go through in the future. So I think that way of thinking is there. So Decoded for me is about bringing people together who are interested in or have a curiosity in technology, science, societal challenges, and design. So it's really taking that broad sense of what design is in there. And we've you mentioned your biomaterials and remembering that paperclip exercise. What we haven't talked about is how we met, or a little bit about our
Right.
careers. Should we just go through that a little bit? Do you want to
Yeah.
start first, Melissa?
Okay. Yeah. Um, so for me, well, I start with being honest, and I was not going to study design. I was going to study medicine actually, and I was
Well,
very
yep.
drawn to medicine. But life happened, and I ended up studying design because I wanted to try it. And actually, I went to study computer science first. But women in STEM back then and now it's not ideal. So I decided to move to design because I love the way that it was framed. And as you said, it was touching on medicine, it was touching on STEM, it was touching on different topics that I was interested, but through a different lens. So that's why I got very interested. I studied industrial design and I was very happy doing like building furniture, building products, building lighting, learning everything about the materials and how they behaved, etc., etc. And then from there, when I graduated, I started up one of my friends and myself, we set up a design studio and we were doing product design and specifically interior design. And I
Yep.
love that um, language that I was learning about the space and how that interacted with the user that directly. Because when I was doing design, in industrial design, it was more about the product per se. And I love this way of interacting with the user. Fast forward, that's what we met. I came to do my master's at Imperial College, London, and then at the Royal
Royal
College.
College of Art, yes.
Oh my
The
God.
Royal, as we people used to call it. That's the
Yeah,
abbreviation,
I
the
don't know
Royal.
why I forgot
Yeah,
about it.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we met there and I studied global innovation design. And I also went to China and Singapore to do the continuation of a master's in Tsinghua University and Nanyang Technological University. And that exposed me to technology in different ways that I didn't know existed, right? Like coding and using technology as an output of the design process. And I loved it.
Yeah.
And then right now, what I'm doing, and I love it, but what I'm doing is social design, which is using my skills to create impact in societal, like big societal issues. And I work for an NGO, and we are focusing on reducing poverty through different business models, through market systems and economic empowerment. What
Hmm.
about you, Saima?
Well, that's fascinating. I didn't know the fact about you starting with computer science. And it's quite interesting because I actually did product design because I'd done maths, physics, and art. So I did start fine art for about 2 weeks and
Yeah.
realized the other part of my brain needed to work as well. And I studied industrial design. But your question about STEM is interesting because actually it was called product design, the degree. And there was 100 students and there were only
Mm.
5 women. So actually that gender imbalance at the time, because it was a BSc, so it was a Bachelor of Science rather than BNA, was still very heavily male dominated at the time. I loved my degree, so it opened my mind about learning about lots of different things in products. And from there, I went to Cambridge University to do an engineering design PhD, which was in the engineering department. So that's where design is placed. I think there's also bits in architecture now in there. And worked with understanding how people access knowledge and data. So at the time, it was about accessing knowledge and how to understand that to support the design process. But over the last 20 years, my research has moved as digital technologies moved to still understanding how people want to design and access knowledge and information, but also thinking about that data. So
Mm.
because that's what's available now. We've got a lot of data in there. And from there, I spent 10 years in Denmark as a, working in a degree called design innovation, which has brought together social SDS type social technology competences together with creative and technical competences together. Really, an open sort of design degree in there, but still technical. And then moved back to Imperial, where we met as head of the Global Innovation Design and working with the Royal College of Art. And then I was actually in the Royal College of Art leading the design products degree before joining Exeter about 5.5 years ago. So now I currently lead this research center, as I mentioned before. But my curiosity in design is design research in a broad way. And it's looking about innovation, technology innovation, but also understanding how we work with digital technologies, particularly, and with a human-centered approach and understanding human representation and human interaction in there. So it's a quite broad, but also niche in a way area. But my interest is very broad. It's very broad in innovation and technology. And through one of my other roles, I get very fortunate to get exposed to really brilliant research taking place. So that really excites me, because I think there is really a need for a podcast like this that is not just about one or the other, and where we bring in very engaged and informed guests into there. So our format in general would be much more about having guests in there who come with some perspective or expertise. And like you say, they're not necessarily designers, they're broader. I would also like to bring future users. I could hear from my own children, they're talking about AI as my AI. And that, like the generation before us.
Wait, what does that mean?
What they believe it's theirs, it's their AI. So it's attached to them, it's almost their pet. And it's a little bit about that relationship. I think even if you probably take kids 5 or 6 years younger than mine, probably 7 or 8 years, that generation probably won't know a life before OpenAI. And that is interesting to me. Do they know that sometimes AI is wrong, that it hallucinates? Do they understand, so how...
That is biased?
Yeah, but they also know how to use it really well. And it's just like if you go back 10, 15 years, that generation are very savvy on social media. They're not interested in Facebook, but they're interested in the Snapchat and the TikToks and the short, instant gratification that comes with it. But that life, that new type of user, I don't think we know what that's going to look like. And that is exciting to explore. What does it mean? Who are we actually going to design for with these new technologies that were coming in? And I'm not sure we're going to know the answer, but I'm sure there's a guest out there that's going to come with some knowledge that is going to be really interesting for us to learn from.
Yeah,
but that's for me what design matters. And perhaps that is what we want to talk about for today. And
and I think that also reinforces why we are designers, right? Like the curiosity doesn't end. We are very curious people. So
we are curious.
Yeah. So, well, thank you everyone for joining the first episode, and we will see you at the next one.
So we will, and we'll continue the discussion on design matters. So that is all for today. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what you think, or if you have an idea for a future guest or topic at www.decodedpodcast.com.
Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you listen, and follow us on TikTok and Instagram at decoded.podcast. See you!